My name is Mia. I'm 34 years old, single, and I live in a small, second-floor apartment in Portland, Oregon. My world is quiet, filled with the gentle rhythms of library hours and the muted hum of city life outside my window. I work as a library assistant at the local branch, earning $36,000 a year before taxes, a number that always feels both precise and impossibly small when I sit down to pay my bills each month. Sometimes, when I'm shelving books or helping a child find their favorite story, I forget about the numbers entirely, but the reminders always come, sooner or later, in the form of rent notices, grocery receipts, or the cracked windshield of my old 2008 Honda Civic that I keep promising myself I'll replace. In my family, I am the poor one. It's not a title anyone says out loud, but it hangs in the air at every holiday gathering, every birthday party, every group text about vacation plans I can't afford. My older brother, Ethan, works in tech and owns a 4-bedroom house in the suburbs with a backyard big enough for summer barbecues and a golden retriever named Max. My sister, Julia, is a marketing manager with a Tesla and a condo overlooking the river. Even my parents, retired and living comfortably on pensions and savings, seem to float above the worries that keep me up at night. Sometimes, I feel like I'm living in a different world from the rest of them, a world where every dollar is counted, where every small indulgence is weighed against next month's rent. At family dinners, I catch the glances when I arrive in my thrift store dress, or when I bring homemade cookies instead of a store-bought cake. My sister-in-law, Lauren, has a way of complimenting me that always leaves a bruise. "Mia, you're so resourceful. I don't know how you get by on so little." She smiles when she says it, but I hear the edge beneath her words. I know I'm supposed to laugh, to be grateful for the recognition, but mostly I just feel exposed. There's an unspoken hierarchy in my family, and I'm always at the bottom. I'm the one who gets the hand-me-down kitchen gadgets, the one who's asked to house-sit or babysit because you have more free time. I'm the one who's expected to be grateful for leftovers, for invitations that come with caveats, for being included at all. I've learned to nod and smile, to swallow the small humiliations, to pretend I don't notice when plans are made without me. The pressure isn't always direct, but it's relentless. There are expectations about how life should look, about what success means. My mother worries aloud that I'm not saving enough for retirement, that I'm not moving up in my career, that I'm not married or even dating. My father is quieter, but I see the disappointment in his eyes when I mention my salary, or when I say I can't afford to fly home for Thanksgiving. Even Ethan and Julia, who love me in their own ways, can't help but compare. "You're so lucky you don't have a mortgage," Ethan once said, as if luck had anything to do with it. Sometimes I wonder if I'm invisible, or if I'm just a cautionary tale, a reminder of what could happen if you don't choose the right path, if you don't work hard enough, if you don't want the same things as everyone else. I feel the weight of their expectations pressing in on me, shaping the edges of my life in ways I can't always see but can always feel. Still, I try to hold on to the things that matter to me. The quiet joy of helping a child discover a new book, the satisfaction of a well-cooked meal, the laughter I share with my niece Ava when we paint together at my kitchen table. These moments are small, but they are mine. They remind me that value isn't always measured in dollars or square footage, that a life can be meaningful even if it doesn't look like everyone else's. But there are days when the comparisons sting, when I feel like I'm always falling short of their expectations, of my own hopes, of some invisible standard I can never quite reach. On those days, I wonder if I'll ever be seen for who I am, rather than for what I lack. Last summer, my brother Ethan got married. It was the kind of wedding you see on Instagram, white tents on a vineyard in Sonoma, a live jazz quartet, a guest list of 180 people. I remember the invitation arriving in the mail, thick, cream cardstock with gold embossed lettering. My name was there, but in the smallest font, tucked at the bottom of the extended family list. I tried not to care. I told myself it was just a detail. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, I got call after call from my mother and Ethan's fiancée, Lauren. They needed help with the seating chart, with the playlist, with finding a last-minute florist who wouldn't charge $5,000 for peonies. I spent hours on Google, making spreadsheets, calling vendors. I never said no. I wanted to be useful. I wanted to feel like I belonged. The day before the wedding, I was at the venue helping Lauren's sister tie ribbons on 180 tiny gift boxes. Each box held a gold-plated keychain engraved with Ethan and Lauren's initials. I did the math in my head. At least $10 each. That's $1,800 on keychains alone. I tried to imagine spending that much on anything, let alone party favors. My own savings account had $200 in it, most of which was earmarked for my car insurance and a dental bill I'd been putting off. That night, Lauren pulled me aside. She was holding a clipboard, her hair perfectly curled, her nails still wet from a fresh manicure. "Mia, I need to talk to you about tomorrow," she said, her voice low. "Of course," I said, trying to sound cheerful. She glanced around, then leaned in. "So, about the reception, we had to make some tough choices with the seating. You'll be at table 16, with the catering staff and some of the plus ones. I hope that's okay. We just wanted to keep the main family tables for people who contributed to the wedding fund." I blinked. "The wedding fund?" She nodded, not meeting my eyes. "Ethan said you weren't able to give, which is totally fine, but we just had to prioritize." I felt my stomach drop. I had given $100, more than I could really afford, when they'd sent out that group email asking for family support, but I guess compared to the $2,000 my older sister had chipped in, it didn't count. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That's fine." She smiled, relieved. "You're such a team player, Mia. And actually, could you come an hour early to help set up the dessert table? We're short on hands." I nodded, numb. I spent that night staring at the ceiling of my tiny apartment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. I kept thinking about the $100 I'd sent them, money I'd planned to use for groceries. I thought about the dress I'd bought for the wedding, marked down to $39.99 at Marshall's, and how Lauren had laughed when I'd shown her a photo. "It's cute," she'd said, "but maybe something a little more formal?" The next day, I arrived early. As asked, I spent 2 hours arranging cupcakes and macarons on silver trays, careful not to touch anything with my bare hands. When the guests arrived, I slipped quietly to table 16. The catering staff were friendly, but busy. The plus ones looked as uncomfortable as I felt. During the speeches, Ethan stood up and thanked everyone who had made this day possible. He listed names, my parents, my older sister, Lauren's family, even some cousins who'd flown in from New York. My name wasn't mentioned. I tried to swallow the lump in my throat. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was just being sensitive. But then, after dinner, I overheard Lauren talking to her bridesmaids. I just didn't want Mia at the main table. You know, she always looks so out of place. I mean, did you see her dress? They laughed. I felt my cheeks burn. I wanted to disappear. Later, as people danced under the fairy lights, I slipped away to the parking lot. I sat in my car, staring at the dashboard, trying not to cry. I thought about every time I'd babysat for Ethan, every time I'd helped Lauren with her resume, every spreadsheet, every phone call. I thought about the $100 I'd sent, the groceries I'd skipped, the dress I'd bought on clearance. Was this who I was to them? Someone to use, someone to hide away, someone not quite good enough for the spotlight? I drove home alone that night, the sounds of laughter and music fading behind me. I told myself I wouldn't cry, but I did. I cried for all the ways I'd tried to belong, and all the ways I'd been told, subtly, or not so subtly, that I never would. I left the wedding before anyone noticed. My heels clicked quietly on the gravel, the sound swallowed by the music and laughter drifting from the tent. I got into my car and closed the door, letting the silence press in around me. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel. I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes rimmed red. My lipstick faded. I looked tired. I looked small. I didn't drive home right away. I sat there, engine off, watching the fairy lights twinkle in the distance. I could see Ethan and Lauren on the dance floor, surrounded by friends and family. Not me. I was outside, in the dark, where I belonged. I felt a sharp ache in my chest, like I'd swallowed a stone. Why did I let myself hope it would be different this time? Why did I keep showing up, keep helping, keep giving, when it was never enough? My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Where are you, honey? Are you coming back for cake?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I scrolled up through our messages, seeing all the times she'd asked me for favors, watching Ava, picking up groceries, lending her $200 when her car broke down. I'd always said yes. Always. I thought about the $100 I'd given Ethan for the wedding fund. I remembered the night I transferred the money, sitting at my kitchen table, staring at my budget. I told myself it was worth it. That family was worth it. That if I just tried a little harder, maybe they'd see me. Maybe they'd love me the way I loved them. But love, I realized, was not a currency they valued. A memory surfaced. Christmas, 3 years ago. I'd spent hours knitting scarves for everyone, choosing colors I knew they'd like. When the gifts were opened, my mother smiled politely, but my sister rolled her eyes. "You know, Mia, you can just buy stuff. It's not like we're poor." Everyone laughed. I laughed too. But inside, I felt something wilt. I remembered another time, Ethan's birthday, the year he lost his job. I'd given him $500, money I'd saved for a trip I never took. He'd hugged me, promised to pay me back. He never did. No one ever mentioned it again. I thought about all the family gatherings where I'd been the one in the kitchen, washing dishes, making sure everyone had what they needed. No one ever asked if I needed anything. Sitting in my car, I felt the weight of all those small betrayals, all those moments I'd swallowed my pride for the sake of peace. I felt anger, sharp and hot, rising up in me, but underneath it was something softer. Grief. Grief for the family I'd wanted, the belonging I'd chased, the love I'd tried to earn. I started the car and drove home, the road blurring through my tears. When I got to my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and sat on the floor, back against the door. I let myself cry, really cry, for the first time in years. I cried for the little girl who used to make cards for everyone's birthday, who thought love was something you could prove if you just tried hard enough. I woke the next morning feeling hollow. My phone was full of messages, photos from the wedding, texts from my mother, a voicemail from Ethan. I didn't answer any of them. I turned my phone off and let the silence settle. For the first time, I let myself imagine what it would be like to stop trying, to stop giving, to stop showing up for people who only called when they needed something. But then I thought of Ava. Ava, who always found me at family dinners, who asked about my job at the library, who wanted to know what I was reading. Ava, who once told me, "Aunt Mia, you're my favorite because you always listen to me." I remembered her small hands in mine, the way her eyes lit up when I showed her how to mix colors with watercolors. I remembered her laugh, her questions, her quiet joy. I thought about her birthday coming up, about the watercolor set I'd bought for her, $18.99, more than I should have spent. But I wanted her to have something special. I thought about the letter I'd written, telling her about the first time I painted as a child, how art had helped me when I felt alone. I sat at my kitchen table, the watercolor set in front of me, the letter folded neatly inside. I stared at it for a long time, my mind turning over and over. Why should I give her anything? Why should I keep giving to a family that never gave back? But then I thought, Ava is not her parents. She is not the laughter at my expense, the exclusion, the careless cruelty. She is just a child, and she loves me in a way that is simple and true. I got up, pulled on my coat, and slipped out into the early morning. The city was quiet, the air cool against my skin. I walked to Ethan's house, the watercolor set tucked under my arm. I left it on their porch, along with the letter. I didn't ring the bell. I didn't want to see anyone. I just wanted Ava to know I remembered her, that I loved her, even if I couldn't be there. As I walked home, I felt both lighter and heavier. Lighter, because I'd done what felt right. Heavier, because I knew nothing would change. My family would go on, their lives full of parties and laughter and money, and I would go on, alone. But maybe, I thought, I could start drawing some lines. Maybe I could stop giving so much to people who didn't value me. Maybe I could save my love for the ones who saw me, really saw me, like Ava. That day, I didn't answer any calls. I didn't check my messages. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the world go by. I let myself feel angry, and sad, and tired. I let myself feel everything I'd pushed down for years. I thought about the next family event, the next request for help, the next time someone would ask me to give more than I had. I wondered if I would say no. I wondered if I could. I didn't have any answers, but for the first time, I let myself ask the questions. Who am I if I stop being the one who always gives? What do I owe my family? And what do I owe myself? Where is the line between love and self-sacrifice? I didn't know, but I knew I had to start finding out. 2 days after I left Ava's birthday gift on their porch, I was still floating in that strange, heavy silence. I hadn't answered a single call or message from my family. My phone sat face down on the kitchen table, battery slowly draining, as if it too was tired of carrying everyone else's expectations. I spent those days in a kind of limbo, reading, walking, trying to let the ache inside me settle into something I could live with. It was late afternoon when my phone buzzed to life, vibrating insistently. I glanced at the screen. Ethan. I let it ring out, then watched as his name was replaced by a voicemail notification. I didn't listen. I wasn't ready. I made tea and sat by the window, watching the sun slip behind the city's rooftops, painting everything in gold and blue. The phone rang again. This time, it was Ava's name. My heart clenched. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen, then answered. Her voice was bright, a little breathless. Aunt Mia, thank you for my present. It's the best one I got. Can I come over and paint with you? I closed my eyes, relief and longing washing through me. Of course, sweetheart. Anytime you want. She giggled. I read your letter at the party. My friends wanted to know if you could teach them to paint too. They said your story was the best. I smiled, tears prickling at my eyes. I'd love that, Ava. I really would. We talked for a few more minutes, her excitement bubbling over as she described the party, the magician, the cake, the bouncy house. But it was my letter she kept coming back to. I'm going to keep it forever, she said. I want to be an artist like you. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet, feeling something shift inside me. I didn't know what it meant yet, but it felt like hope. That evening, my phone lit up with a text from Lauren. I stared at her name for a long time before opening it. I owe you an apology. Ava read your letter out loud at the party. All her friends wanted to know if you could teach them to paint. I'm sorry for what I said. I read the message 3 times. It didn't erase the sting of her words, or the way she'd made me feel at the wedding, but it was something. I set the phone aside, unsure how to respond. A few minutes later, my mother called. I almost didn't answer, but something in me wanted to hear her voice. She sounded different, softer, almost fragile. Mia, honey, she said, and I could hear she'd been crying. I didn't know they'd done that to you. You're always so generous, even when you have so little. I didn't know what to say. For a moment, all the words I'd bottled up threatened to spill out, but I just listened, letting her speak. I saw Ava's letter, she continued, voice trembling. She read it to me, too. I never realized how much you give. I'm sorry. Mia, I should have stood up for you. I pressed the phone to my ear, eyes closed. Thank you, Mom, I whispered. That means a lot. After we hung up, I sat in the dark, letting the words settle. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not for what I lacked, but for what I gave. But the real surprise came the following weekend. It was Sunday afternoon. I was at home, sorting through a pile of library books, when there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Ethan, Lauren, and Ava standing on the stoop. Ava clutched her watercolor set, her cheeks flushed with excitement. Ethan looked nervous, hands shoved deep in his pockets. Lauren's eyes were red, as if she'd been crying. Can we come in? Ethan asked, voice tentative. I stepped aside, my heart thudding in my chest. They filed in, Ava immediately making a beeline for my tiny kitchen table, where she began unpacking her paints. Ethan cleared his throat. Mia, we owe you an apology, a real one. Lauren nodded, her voice shaky. I was wrong. I was cruel. I let my own insecurities and pride get in the way of seeing you for who you are. I didn't know what to say. I stood there, arms crossed, feeling both exposed and strangely powerful. Ethan stepped forward. Ava's letter, your letter, made us realize how much we take you for granted. All those times you helped us, all the things you did. We never really said thank you. I'm sorry, Mia, truly. I looked at them, searching their faces for any sign of insincerity, but all I saw was regret. Lauren wiped her eyes. The girls at the party, Ava's friends, they all wanted to know more about you, about how you make art, about your job at the library. They said you sounded like the coolest adult they'd ever heard of. Ava's teacher even called me to ask if you'd be willing to come in and teach a painting class. Ava piped up from the table, waving a paintbrush. Please, Aunt Mia? My friends want to learn too. I laughed, the sound surprising even me. Of course, Ava, I'd love that. Ethan stepped closer. We want to make things right. We want you to know you're part of this family, not because of what you can give us or how much money you have, but because of who you are. For a moment, I just stood there, letting their words wash over me. I thought about all the times I'd been overlooked, all the ways I'd tried to earn my place. I thought about the wedding, about Christmases past, about every little sacrifice. And then I realized something. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need their apologies, though they were nice to hear. I knew my own worth, finally. But I also knew forgiveness wasn't a single moment. It was a process, a choice I'd have to make again and again. I walked over to Ava, kneeling beside her. What should we paint today? I asked. She grinned. Can we paint a family? Our family? I smiled, tears pricking at my eyes. I think that's a wonderful idea. As we painted together, Ethan and Lauren sat nearby, watching quietly. I could feel the tension easing, the old wounds beginning to heal. It wasn't perfect. There was still hurt, still history, but it was a start. When they left, Ethan hugged me tightly. We love you, Mia. We really do. Lauren squeezed my hand. Thank you for giving us another chance. After they were gone, I sat at the table, looking at the painting Ava and I had made. It wasn't perfect. Some colors bled. Some lines were crooked. But it was ours. It was real. That night, I got an email from Ava's teacher, inviting me to speak to her class about art and storytelling. I stared at the screen, overwhelmed. For so long, I'd felt invisible, unimportant. Now, suddenly, people wanted to hear my story. I lay in bed, thinking about everything that had happened, about how a simple letter, a gift from the heart, had done what years of sacrifice couldn't. It had made them see me. I realized I couldn't control how others saw me, or what they valued, but I could choose to show up as myself, to give what I could. and to draw boundaries when I needed to. The next day, I called my mother. I told her I loved her, but I needed some space. I told her I'd always be there for Ava, but I wouldn't keep giving until I had nothing left for myself. She cried, but she understood. For the first time, I felt free, not because my family had changed, but because I had. Maybe that's what real value is, not what you have, but what you give, and what you're willing to keep for yourself. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Confrontation and setting boundaries. The dinner invitation came via text from Ethan. Mom's making pot roast. Can you come over Sunday? We need to talk. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. The last time I'd sat at their dining table. I'd been arranging cupcakes while Lauren adjusted her veil. Now, 6 weeks after the wedding and 2 weeks after Ava's birthday. The idea of walking back into that house made my chest tighten. But I owed it to myself, and to that younger version of me who'd always swallowed her pride, to speak up. I arrived at 6 p.m., wearing the same $39.99 dress from the wedding. Let them see it again. I thought, let them remember. The air smelled of rosemary and guilt. My mother hugged me too tightly at the door, her perfume cloying. Ethan stood awkwardly in the hallway, hands in his pockets. Lauren hovered near the stairs, her eyes avoiding mine. Only Ava broke the tension, barreling into my legs with a squeal. "Aunt Mia, did you bring more paint?" "Not today, kiddo," I said, ruffling her hair. "But soon." Dinner was a quiet affair at first. Forced small talk about the weather, Mom's garden, Ava's school play. The pot roast tasted like ash in my mouth. I waited until the plates were cleared, until Ava was upstairs watching cartoons, before I spoke. "You wanted to talk," I said, folding my napkin into precise squares. Ethan cleared his throat. We wanted to apologize. Properly." Lauren nodded, her manicured hands twisting in her lap. "What happened at the wedding? And with Ava's party? It was unfair. We're sorry." I studied their faces, Ethan's furrowed brow, Lauren's trembling lip, Mom's tear-filled eyes. For years, I dreamed of this moment. But now that it was here, I felt no triumph, only a deep, weary clarity. "Thank you," I said quietly, "but apologies don't fix the pattern." Mom reached for my hand. "Pattern? Honey, what do you mean?" I pulled back gently. "Let's start with the $500 I lent Ethan in 2022 when he was unemployed." Ethan flinched. "Or the $100 I contributed to your wedding fund. Lauren, money I took from my grocery budget. Or the 63 hours I spent last year babysitting Ava for free while you two went on weekend getaways." The numbers hung in the air like icicles. Lauren paled. "We didn't realize—" "Of course you didn't," I interrupted, my voice steady. "Because you never asked. You just took—" Ethan leaned forward, his chair scraping loudly. "Mia, we'll pay you back. Every penny." "It's not about the money," I said, surprised by how calm I felt. "It's about respect. You put me at table 16 with strangers. You told Ava I'd embarrass her. You've treated me like a charity case for years." Mom dabbed her eyes with a napkin. "We never meant to hurt you." "Intentions don't erase impact," I said, echoing words I'd practiced in the mirror all week. From now on, things change. Lauren opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. 1. No more financial favors. If you need money, ask the bank. 2. I won't be excluded from family events. If I'm too poor for your parties, I'm too poor to babysit or plan them. 3. When I say no, it means no, not convince me or guilt me. The grandfather clock ticked loudly in the silence. Outside, a car alarm wailed. Ethan rubbed his temples. "This is a lot to process." "It's non-negotiable," I said, standing. "I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you who I am now." Lauren stood abruptly, her chair clattering to the floor. "You think you're better than us? With your Your library salary and your thrift store clothes? For the first time all night, I smiled. No, I just finally know I'm equal. Ava's laughter drifted downstairs, bright, unburdened. It anchored me. Mom spoke through tears. Will we still see you? I thought of Christmases past, me in the kitchen scrubbing pans while others exchanged gifts, of birthdays where my handmade cards were tossed aside, of 1,000 small silences that had chipped away at me. On my terms, I said, grabbing my coat, starting now. At the door, Ethan caught my arm. Wait, the money? I'll write you a check tonight. I shook my head. Keep it. Consider it my final gift to the family Mia who thought love had to be earned. The night air felt sharp and clean as I walked to my car. Behind me, the house glowed like a lantern, warm, inviting, but no longer my sanctuary. I drove home slowly, windows down, letting the wind dry the tears on my cheeks. When I unlocked my apartment, I did something I hadn't done in years. I left my phone on silent. I painted instead, swirling blues and golds across a canvas until 2A, Mum. The colours didn't fix anything, but they reminded me of something Ava had said during our last art lesson. Mistakes are just places where the paint decided to go somewhere better. I fell asleep wondering if families, like paintings, could be reworked, if boundaries were the brushstrokes that finally let me be seen. The weeks after that dinner passed in a kind of quiet that felt both unfamiliar and deeply comforting. For the first time in years, my phone wasn't buzzing with requests for favors or last-minute emergencies. There were no guilt-laden texts about family parties, no subtle reminders about pitching in or helping out. Instead, I filled my days with the things that made me feel whole: long walks through the city, evenings with a good book, afternoons spent lost in color and canvas. My bank account didn't suddenly swell with money. I still drove my old Honda, windshield cracked and radio stuck on the same 2 stations. Rent still arrived with the same regularity, and I still counted every dollar before buying groceries. But the difference was this: I no longer measured my worth by the numbers in my account, or by the approval of people who had never really seen me. Ava became my most regular guest. Every Saturday, she'd show up at my door with her watercolor set and a new story to tell. We'd paint together for hours, sometimes in silence, sometimes with bursts of laughter that echoed through my little apartment. She'd ask questions about art, about books, about the world. Sometimes she'd ask about family, and I'd answer honestly, but gently. I wanted her to know that love could be complicated and still be real. My family changed, in small ways. Ethan started calling just to check in, not to ask for anything. Lauren was quieter, more careful with her words. My mother apologized more than once, and though I didn't always know how to respond, I accepted her efforts. I saw them trying, and I let that be enough for now. But I also kept my boundaries firm. I said no when I needed to. I didn't explain, or apologize, or shrink myself to fit their comfort. I realized that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, or pretending everything is fine. Sometimes it just means letting go of the hope that the past could have been different. There were moments when the old ache crept back in, a family photo shared in the group chat that I hadn't been invited to take, a holiday gathering where my absence was noted but not mourned. But those moments didn't break me anymore. I learned to hold my own hand, to remind myself that I am enough, with or without their applause. I began to notice how many of us walk through life carrying the weight of other people's expectations, how often we trade our own happiness for a seat at someone else's table, how easy it is to believe that love must be earned, that value is something given from the outside, rather than something we carry within us. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder how many people feel invisible in their own families, or in their own lives, simply because they don't fit the mold. How many of us are measured by what we have, not who we are? How many are told, in ways big and small, that our love, our effort, our presence isn't quite enough? What would happen if we stopped chasing approval and started honoring our own needs? If we drew boundaries not as walls, but as invitations to be seen and respected. If we forgave, not to let others off the hook, but to free ourselves from the grip of old wounds. I don't have all the answers. I still stumble, still question, still long for connection. But I know now that my worth isn't up for debate. I know that kindness matters more than status, that generosity is a gift best given freely, not demanded or expected. I know that living for myself doesn't mean loving others less. It just means loving myself enough to stop disappearing. If you've ever felt invisible, or less than, or measured by something you couldn't control, I hope you know you're not alone. I hope you find the courage to draw your own lines, to claim your own space, to define your own value. What about you? Where do you draw the line between giving and losing yourself? How do you forgive without forgetting? What does it mean, for you, to be truly seen? I'd love to hear your story. Maybe together, we can paint a new picture, one where everyone belongs, just as they are.